Hey legends, and welcome back to the least knowledgeable sim racing channel, where we're considering rebranding as the occasionally competent sim racing channel. Big thanks to Mike from SimRacing604 for hosting yet another league race on simracing.gp. Today's race was quite eventful, with some rather extreme weather shifts between practice, quali and race. I'm going to show you the race and narrate how I somehow fumbled my way into taking pole position in what was my very first podium in an online race. In case you're a newer viewer, the reason for this is that I've traditionally just been a single player hot lap and AI race kind of guy, gradually getting into competitive play more over the last few weeks. I had a lot of fun, and I want to thank everyone who participated in the race for being really good natured. These league events inspired me to create my own community for subscribers of this channel on simracing.gp, so if you guys like the look of this race and want to participate in future casual, fun-oriented racing in 2021 and beyond, I'll leave the links for you down in the description below. Let's move on to the race, but before we do, be sure to check that you're subscribed to this channel in order to not miss out on future racing news. We had a very interesting qualifying session leading up to this race as we come up to the start line. The temperature was jacked up to a point where the track temp was 37 degrees Celsius as Mr. Luca Conti next to me weaves wildly even as we come up to the starting grid.
Tried to cycle the wipers and I hit the ignition, so I'm just returning to my spot like an idiot.
It's the mandatory self-justifications from everybody before we start the race.
Good luck, everyone.
Bunch of very cool people all wishing each other well for the race. This is the kind of racing I want to be a part of, you know? Alright, hold your speed. I'm still trying to get used to this mechanic. It's very, very bizarre, but here we are. Alright, green, we're going, and unfortunately Mr. Luca next to us, he forgot to change engine mixture to 1, so he dropped way back in the field there. To 3rd, or 4th is it even? As I try to desperately get some temp into my tires on this very first lap. So, race strategy for this was very, very interesting. We came into this thinking there'd be a mandatory pit stop, but we're informed in the 11th hour there wouldn't be. Now, there's meant to be rain halfway through the race, so everybody's sort of in two minds. They're like, alright, do I pit halfway? Do I bring half a fuel load, then move on to wets? What do I do? I decided to make the gamble to do a full fuel load, as you can see, the full 84 litres, of which I have about 81 left at the moment. As everybody chats on lap 1, I hear there was a disaster with the GT4s on T1 way back behind us, so we're very, very lucky that we qualified in 2nd. Coming around, I'm still trying to get some heat into the tires. Now, you may be wondering what I'm doing with the TC. This is something I picked up off Tortellini driving the AMG on this track. TC at 9 for the majority of it, bringing it back down to 2 for the hairpin to be able to power on rotate out. I really, really enjoyed this. It improved my lap times a lot, so I decided to keep it for the race. So I was basically dynamically jiggling around the TC for the entire race. It was kind of fun. I enjoy it. It's either that or the brake bias. It gives you something more to do. You feel more like an F1 driver. So we're creating some pretty healthy space to the 488s behind us, and I know you guys probably think it's sacrilege at this point that I'm not in a 488. Unfortunately, the AMG is just broken. Its BOP is too good in ACC right now, and I had to take it for Suzuka. It's just too much better. I did definitely try to get a tune for the 488. I tried to get a tune for the 720 going, but I just could not get it within a second of this car. It's just so much quicker. Alright, so far so good. Lap 1, our tyres are almost up to temp. We're in the mid-27s. Still kind of feeling things out here and there. I haven't driven this car with a full fuel load. I've driven it with about half a fuel load, expecting a mandatory pit stop. Now, my gamble for this is to stay on slicks, assuming that the track won't get wet enough to necessitate wets for the back half of the race. Now, we're expecting the rain to kick in 30 minutes into the race. That's what's going through my mind. And because I don't need to pit, I just brought the whole fuel load with me, assuming that whatever time I lose to the wet surface at the end will still be offset by the fact that everybody will be running through the pits and having their pit crew working on their cars. I'm still jiggling the car around a bit. The balance is okay, all things considered. Things aren't feeling too bad. It's driving pretty much as it had in my practice sessions. Creating a healthy gap, and we've got Mr. Luca Conti has already come up to 2nd behind me there. -3 seconds behind. And I know that the majority of my battle here is going to be defending him, essentially. My assumption is that he came in with half a fuel load, at least half of what I have, about 40 liters, and I'll just need to defend for as long as humanly possible until he gets into the pits, and then I try and kind of make up the difference with the rest of the fuel load I have. At least that's the race strategy at this point. Just try to keep it as clean as I possibly can as I warm up into it. As I am newer to online racing, I do still get nerves whenever we start, so it's something I'm looking to work through more and more and more. Now, you're about to witness what was the worst disaster for me on the entire on the entire race. However, you can see based on how I caught that high-speed drift that it had happened many, many times in practice, so I was very, very well practiced at actually catching that horrific high-speed slide at 130R. I don't know why it sometimes happens with the AMG and doesn't other times. I, to this point, just cannot work it out. It's all about how you finesse the brake, I think, leading into that corner where you shift the weight, but it just goes into this weird, uncontrollable slide. All things considered, considering how horrific the slide actually was, I held it pretty well. Now, unfortunately, my tires at this point are completely on fire, as you can see. I'm just drifting everywhere. Luca being very, very kind and not doing any pushing while my tires are still molten. Very gentlemanly driving.
Let your tires cool down.
Thank you very much.
We're gonna have a battle. It's gonna be a proper battle.
I think you guys can just enjoy watching me battle with this molten tire AMG for a little while. I was just wondering, like, when's this gonna end? When can I get back to driving it like an automobile? Yeah, I'm still getting oversteer mid-corner. Still oversteer mid-corner. Oh, man. And here we go, TC going back down to about 3. I'm hoping for the best. I scrub the tires in and power on out. This is probably the most R-factor feeling corner out of all of them because I jogged the TC down so low. We go back up to 9. As I hope I've regained my grip. And, you know, from that moment on, you're always just wondering, will it happen again? Every time you get to 130R, it's like, will I lose the rear end of my car? And you can't push for those extra, 2/10. Unfortunately, my best lap being highly mediocre at this point on account of the old slide. So out of this entire race, I would say the only person that was at my pace level, in fact, quicker, was Luca over there behind me in the AMG. So he was probably the only person I was worried about in the entire race. But that being said, in practice, in quali, I was getting mid 2 minutes, and as it starts to rain way earlier than any of us had expected, so massive amounts of worry kicking in. I'm wondering to myself at this point, did I pick the right race strategy? Should I have banked on going in the pits halfway through? Should I have only brought 40 liters into this? But right now it's too late to worry, so I'm just pushing on ahead, hoping for the best, knowing that the 202 up there will possibly remain as my quickest lap for the rest of the race, assuming the rain sustains. Which is unfortunate, as I was about to say that we were getting in the mid flat 2s with full race fuel loads before. I was in the 159s in some of my qualifying sessions offline as well, so this pace was far slower than I was used to. But that always happens online, I find. There are so many more variables at play, things you hadn't banked on, traffic. I'm still very bad at managing traffic during qualifying sessions. And it's interesting, unlike the last race where I found myself fast forwarding throughout large chunks of it so you guys wouldn't get bored, it's so eventful, this one. There's so much going on all the time. I mean, I'm already catching a McLaren. I'm assuming that Jay Bray there had pitted very, very early for wets or something like that. It's the only way. Whoa, as I catch the inside curb and almost completely lose the car. Luckily, I put a lot of practice into this track. Oh, but it doesn't prepare me for the insane understeer off the line. As Luca pushes next to me.
I'll give you 3 laps to do it.
Doesn't quite have the juice to get past me on the straight there. Now again, very gentlemanly driving. As he backs off coming up to 130R, I think he realizes that we can both end our races here very, very easily, and I made another mistake.
That was my speed, very end too. So
The one thing I love about the AMG is the way it takes the chicane here. Unfortunately, I took the chicane a little bit too aggressively. As I apologize to everybody in the race for my very errant driving.
Yeah, just take it a bit easy. Racetrack for 5 seconds.
This is my very first time ever driving in wet weather in ACC. I mean, I did 5 minutes of it back when it was in early access, but it was essentially a different game back then with a completely different driving model, and this is probably the worst driving of the entire race that you're going to see, as I'm fumbling to understand where my brake markers now are, you know, when the car is going to feel right, because I'm using all the correct markers, all the correct turn-in points for a dry race for myself, but none of it is working right now, so I'm having to readjust dynamically on the fly, which is one of the most fun parts about, well, not only online driving, but wet weather racing, or racing with dynamic weather conditions. You're constantly on the fly, you can't over-prepare, and it shows you whether you're adaptable, more like a real race car driver. As this AMG stays on ahead of me on account of my woeful driving, but we will catch him before too long. Coming up to the hairpin again, as I lower my TC back to 2. Is where it's meant to be for this. See if we can power on oversteer out. Yep, perfect. It gains me about 2 to 3 tenths on the hairpin exit, dropping the TC back down to there versus 9. So now, unfortunately, our main contender, Mr. Luca, is stuck without force feedback at the moment.
Let's see if I can reboot it.
It was very nice of Mr. World's Fastest Gamer to let us through there. So now I can finally focus on consolidating my position. There's no more pressure from the rear. I know that eventually the GT4 traffic is going to come up, but I'm going to do my best. I'm just going to consolidate my driving style. Try to be as consistent as I can under the circumstances. Try to actually work out where my new brake markers and such are. No, overshooting the chicane one more time. All right, 3rd time's the charm, right, guys? Let's see how we go next time around. So the next bit of driving is essentially just the gap between me catching the tail end of the GT4 back markers, just trying to consolidate everything I can about the feel of the AMG. Now I'm feeling that the track is getting wetter lap after lap after lap, and I don't know what to expect at this point because, again, I've not driven ACC in the wet weather for, well, nigh on 2 years now. And it's like, will the dry line get super greasy? Will I have to start adopting a wet line? I've not practiced the wet line, so what would the wet line actually be at Suzuka? Do I need to move on to wets? If so, when do I go for the wets? What pressures should I have the wets at? I mean, none of this is stuff I've practiced for. I don't know what to adjust on the car in order to make it tolerate these conditions, but for the time being, the plan is to just consolidate and stick to the racing line with my slicks, my dry slicks, for as long as I possibly can, to make the most of it and hope that the rain doesn't get too much worse than this. Because right now, while it is slowing down our lap times quite a lot, it is still manageable. And I figure that the more and more cars go around the racing line, the drier and drier it should be. Because there are a lot of us in this race, 9 on 30, so it should be okay. Now coming up to 130R in the wet, you can say my confidence is somewhat shaken as I start to downshift as opposed to taking it in 5th. So far so good. Car seems more comfortable with it now. I was going to say that maybe it's a matter of just getting the tyre temps up, but the tyre temps are most definitely not up as we're currently driving on frozen slicks. Looking down there, we've got the tyres in the mid 24 PSI range, not idyllic at all. And of course us, for the first time, taking the chicane more correctly. On a very conservative breakpoint for T1 there, not wanting to shoot out. That would be an absolute disaster, even with the FIA sanctioned runoff. It still costs you a lot of time running off there. Coming through the curves, it's very, very interesting. I'm finding myself sticking down to 2nd rather than shifting up to 3rd. I just can't maintain the torque. And I was remembering what Mr. James Baldwin was telling us in our interview about driving GT3s in the wet. Like, his whole idea about driving GT3s in the wet initially was incorrect. He would upshift quickly and dump all the torque from the car, thinking that hitting high revs would cause him to spin out. But no, in GT3s, the TC does all the work for you. So you're actually aiming for those high revs. Those high revs are where all the torque are at. That's how you actually get out of the corners. That's how you maintain the grip on the track. and you have to lean on the TC to help you out. So I actually dropped the TC down to 4 this time, hoping for the best. Hooking on the inside, so I can see my corrective driving is a lot better for this race than it was for Spa. Had I been better at the Spa race, I may never have spun in the first place. But live and learn, right? That's what these races are for. As we approach one of the first of our GT4s now, with the Audi in front of us, very kindly letting us through, maintaining his racing line, not cutting in on the inside. Thank you very much. Very, very tricky conditions to overtake in, because the GT3s can't quite apply their advantage as much as they normally can in the wet weather. We just don't have the traction. Coming up to the Ginetta. Bear in mind, I wasn't flashing him to get out of my way, I was just flashing him to let him know that I was going to go for the pass. I found that this helped me a lot when I was doing the Spa Invitational race in R-Factor. When the LMPs flashed me, I knew it's like, okay, on this corner he's going to go for the move. That way I can just stay predictable. Nailing the chicane, well, 80% nailing the chicane one. Should probably stay off the curbs a lot more in these kind of conditions as we approach a hurricane that's having a very hard time for some reason.
10 to 14 seconds per lap.
Now, so far so good. Our 6th lap concluded as our lap times go from the 202s into the 213s. Astounding what the race does to what the rain rather does to the track. But I'm having so much fun at this point. Ironically, the style of driving that's required for this is far closer to what I'm used to, far closer to what I got into sim racing with. It's far closer to rally style driving. So it's much more on the limit, much more seesawing the wheel, much more feeling for grip, feeling for weight balance. And as you can see, I'm just kind of having the time of my life, feeling out what the car will do under various circumstances. As I unfortunately understeer it out on power. I was hoping that I could get some power on oversteer, but I think with the TC at 9, you're really not going to get any of that. Now a nice reprieve as we're about 10 seconds out from catching the next car. 2 GT3s ahead of us, astoundingly, so my assumption at this point is that people are pitting for wets, much to their future dismay. I'm sure they'll find it's way too dry at the moment for wets, so what's going to happen is as soon as they get back on the track, the wets are going to overheat. They're going to find they have even worse lap times than they had with the dry slicks, and they would have wasted all that time for a pit stop that they didn't necessarily need at this point. So we're sticking to our course. I'm pretty happy about my race strategy choice to take the entire fuel load to avoid the pit stop. That was the gamble I made coming into this, thinking it could result in the win. We've got our next competitor, W Stokes, 13 seconds behind us, so we're not doing too badly at the moment. AMG is still maintaining its advantage. As I brake solely in a straight line before I turn now, I am just petrified of trail braking into 130R. I mean, if I'd spun in the dry, just imagine what would happen with a wet track with horrible tire temperatures.
Yellow flag ahead, be careful.
Slow car ahead, I mean, most cars have been slow ahead at this point, so as we push on, I think that was RIP to the Bentley there. Coming up to T1, nice and greasy track at this point. As I get a little bit more confident at that brake point, I've actually almost nailed it for once as I understeer myself with the throttle mid-corner. Highly professional move there. I don't know why I keep running onto the grass there. I don't know what it is. I think it's the fact that just all of my turn-in points, my brake points are off, and I just don't really know when to go for my moves. Oh, as third gear just shoots me way wide. So what's happening is that the dry line has become super greasy at this point. As you can see mid-corner, I'm just feeling for grip. I'm constantly just doing minor seesaws with the wheel. Lots of fun though, lots of fun. Far more dynamic, a lot less robotic driving style required for this as I move the brake bias rearward, drop down the TC to hope for a decent turn in here for once as I overshoot the hairpin, unfortunately. Not going to have a decent turn in this time. As we start to catch the mighty Porsche. I hear the Porsche is currently fast with the BOP, but maybe not so much at Suzuka. I think the AMG just dominates this track currently. Porsche almost more confident than me through 130R there. As I try to brake heavily. Wondering what's going to happen here.
Car
Oh, he sees position. Very, very nice. He was under blue flag. I mean, no obligation in this league when you're under blue flag to actually move off your line. It's my responsibility to find a way around, but it may have been tricky down the straight here. So things are very interesting. The guys that were in the 2-minute flat range are now doing 2:11s. But speaking for myself, at least, I'm having a lot more fun with it. Far more eventful race than the one at Spa. Far less error prone, strangely. I mean, I guess I had the compulsory high-speed spin on lap 2. That seems to be becoming my trademark, if nothing else. As we come up to a GT4 and a GT3. And another GT4, so lots of traffic up ahead of me here. No time to speed up yet, guys. The race is just chock full of action. As the Porsche very, very nicely just sticks to his line, lets me through. Unfortunately, getting off the dry line, attempting the overtake, very, very dangerous right now. I immediately felt the loss of grip. No way to adhere traction to the rear wheels as the Lexus goes wide and then rejoins quite safely. Good for you. And does a mid-corner slip again. I think your TC is a little bit low, my friend. Better stay off those curbs. Massive blue flags for everyone. I don't know if I flash him here. Maybe I should have. Maybe I shouldn't have. Do we? Yeah, well, as he indicates, I go for the move. No time to cut onto the outside of the turn. Unfortunately, he shoots out wide. Now we've got our little baby AMG here letting us through. It's always hard to know what to do in those situations. I always expect the GT4s to stick to their line. In fact, I prefer that they just stick to their line. If you stick to your line, at least you're predictable. I know what you're going to do. If you just go out wide like that, I might go out wide with you because I don't want to cut in on the inside thinking you will dive in on me. So nice and predictable is what we want to be. And one thing I love about this race is that all the practice has made me far more familiar with Suzuka than I ever had been in the past, at least driving GT cars.
Yellow flag in sector 3.
Yellow flags everywhere as people go cascading off the track. But I can't see any of this action because I'm just having my own race with the GT4 back markers here in the Maserati.
Just passed me. I accidentally pressed the...
He must be having a heck of a time. Absolutely no assists in that car. In the wet, I can't even imagine what that would feel like. Backmarking would not even be shameful.
Slow the car down.
Gradually feeling my way through the track. Trying the TC at 4 this time. Working out all new breakpoints for the hairpin. It's well sooner than I've ever practiced in the dry. So every lap I get a little bit tighter, a little bit more dialed in as we come up to another Porsche. They do look very, very nice from behind, the GT3 Porsches. Not quite as nice as the GTE, the 991 RSR, but close. As I find that the track is getting greasier and greasier, surprisingly. Oh, pay respects to the Porsche guys. Could not handle that lift-off oversteer mid-corner. Absolutely brutal in the rain, even light rain. As we maintain first, we can't even see where second is. They're so far behind. As we almost nailed the chicane, where you can be so aggressive with the curbs in the AMG. It's what I love about it. As the TC violently pulsates, looking for traction anywhere it can find it.
Because it'll go back to drying, probably.
Getting ever so confident in this braking zone.
Thanks, Abrahams.
Could probably do it a little bit later again. 7/10 drops on T1 compared to the dry conditions. Unreal.
West, but it's not wet enough.
So we're already a second down compared to the dry laps. It pretty much gives you an idea of what happens to the track when you're racing with this much rain.
I can attest to that.
Me too.
That's
So
exactly
what the guys are talking about here is essentially their escapades pitting for wet tires. They're finding that the track is still way too dry for wets. It's not pleasant for slicks either, but unfortunately the wets are overheating right now drastically. Yet at this point, it's still better to drive on frozen slicks, so we're holding course. We're hoping we won't need to pit for the rest of the race. We're hoping that the rain doesn't get any more extreme than this. We can just keep doing what we're doing. Nice and consistent, as we've been taught by the team. By our first foray into competitive racing with the Nürburgring 24 Hours. I've got to say, doing the Nürburgring 24 Hours, my very first online race ever, has made everything else in contrast seem so much easier. That going through this process is just kind of pleasurable. As I shoot out wide, hoping the curb doesn't just pirouette me into the sunset, or sunrise rather. I think we're racing at 5 a.m. here. My awful safety rating gradually increasing the more and more of these races I do. Now, unfortunately, for years and years, I've driven in ACC with the AI chipping away at my safety rating with their horrific driving style. As you can see, come actual racing, I'm not all that aggressive with the people around me. I try to be as respectful as I can with limits and their lines, especially considering it's multi-class. But unfortunately, my safety rating has been completely obliterated by the AI in the offline races, so I'm slowly trying to build that back up.
I can show you guys if you want. There's a program called
We've got Arius coming up behind us, one of the faster-paced gentlemen from the last Spa race. It's coming up about 20 seconds behind us.
Turn FANATEC LEDs on. And fan of that. And there's also
as we catch yet more GT4 backmarker traffic, or rather midfield traffic at this point, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. I have the same, so I'd like to get that on. Yeah, SimHub's free. I can, if anyone
Well, heck,
wants
who
to
knows? These could even be the class
stay in
leaders.
the call after the race, you know. Show you guys how to get it and boot it up.
I'm trying to work out where's my move going to happen. Where's the safe place? Don't grab too much of the curb. I'm flashing here to let them know I'm going to make the move. Unfortunately, the Mustang doesn't see it.
Car on the right.
Oh, my Mustang brother.
Clear on the right.
Him quickly apologizing for not seeing me there. And then me explaining... Yes, it is indeed me. But quickly explaining via the radio that I hadn't meant to attempt to cause a crash there. I'm glad that we got through that in one piece. So far so good, all things considered. You got to make sure you give a lot of advance notice, guys, as much as possible. Now, I'm not sure if flashing is the best way to go about it. I don't like stressing people out, but sometimes you do need to flash them to let them know that you're there. I've had some of the GT4s not realize I was coming upon them so quickly. It's an issue that I sometimes have in these races. It's an issue I've had in some pub practice servers. Now, unfortunately, due to me jumping straight into competitive racing via essentially esports competitions, my pace in a lot of those situations, public service situations, tends to be a fair bit quicker than many of the guys in there, and coming up to them so much more quickly, it makes it very difficult to actually announce your presence. As I feel for the limit here now, it's a miracle that curb didn't massacre me. As we get a nice clean track for the next little while, as somebody comes out of the pits actually. No, we've got an AMG coming out of the pits
maybe
there.
I had the window down.
Christmas. Good time of year for you, man. I wonder if it was the same one I was behind before. Paint job is the same. How ironic would that be? The two AMGs back to back. Now, I didn't have the livery I wanted. I wanted my nice neon lime green one that people couldn't possibly ignore. But due to the server not wanting to accept me as a driver for a little while, it was kind of tricky. I just kind of went in with the default livery, which is this dark blue one. Kind of camouflages a bit into the overcast sky, sadly. Now, as great as this race is, guys, I feel like it's just missing one elusive element. Just that one... it's that thing that starts with C and ends with 8R. It just... I feel like it would elevate this experience to the next level. Being able to race in the car of cars. Alright, as we start coming up to Jay Proctor in the GT4 Audi here. I've noticed that Arius has slowly been catching me here, so my pace hasn't been phenomenal. I'm not really sure what's going on. Maybe those guys pitted, maybe they're on wets, maybe the wets are starting to pay off, or maybe I'm just slowing down too much. Maybe it's the fact that I took my entire fuel load with me, or maybe I'm just slow. It could in fact be that. Or it could quite simply be all the traffic I was encountering. It's what I love about multi-class racing. It's so dynamic. Everything that you practice in your hot laps, in your practice sessions, you can pretty much throw out the window. None of it matters. You won't be taking any of the same lines. You'll end up getting rain and just slipping around everywhere. You have to be very adaptable, and that makes it far more closer to real life racing, which I always appreciate. We go down into fourth, get on the pedal. That wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad. It was conservative, but not so conservative that it was super slow as I completely massacre the chicane. I do know it's called a chicane, by the way, guys, just in case there's a mandatory smartass in the comments. It's our new meme. Got Arius back at negative 20 seconds, which is good. I'm guessing he's running into some of his own traffic now. It can be quite tricky managing that traffic in these races. In fact, that's half the battle. Just race awareness, racecraft as they call it, something I'm very much lacking in right now, but trying to get better at. I watch many hours of onboard footage of GT3s, Blancpain series, GT World Challenge. My man James Baldwin's on board, just trying to get a feel for what happens in the real life things, you know, how to translate those situations to the simulated realm so I can be a more effective driver in these events. Unfortunately, with Luca largely out of the running, not having force feedback anymore, I've kind of lost my main competitor in this race. So I'm just trying to consolidate, again, keep things nice and consistent, enjoy the last 11 or so minutes of the race, don't make any major mistakes, don't drop any major amount of time, because right now I stand to do more damage than good by pushing. I'm just trying to keep it nice and consistent, as I have to brake ever earlier on this very greasy dry line. Now, while the dry line in ACC is dynamic, it's static in its geometry. Apparently, according to Unreal 4, they can't actually vary it or have a real road system, but, you know, take that with a grain of salt. They said the same thing about 24-hour day-night transitions and weather in AC, and, I mean, look at what Soul Mod and Custom Shaders patch have done, right? So it could just be a matter of, hey, Unreal doesn't actually have it pre-baked into the code base, but we could actually code it in ourselves if we were so inclined, but we're not so inclined because it's more work than we'd be inclined to do. That's what that kind of a statement reads like to me. The reason it reads like that to me is because I'm a director of a software company, and that's usually how coders will speak to you when they're too lazy to do something. Arius still about on par with us.
Yellow flag accepted.
Still about negative 20 seconds in his Porsche. As I slightly overshoot but catch the drift. Oh yes! This is the kind of driving I was bred for. Please more rain, Mr. Mike, for future races. Let's do Bathurst in the rain and just massacre one another. It would be like King of the Hill 2021 edition. ACC PUBG mode. Only one survives. Interestingly, I'm finding that my fuel usage in the wet is far lower than it was in the dry. So I'm doing about 3.57 liters a lap, whereas I was doing about 3.68, I believe, in the dry. So I could have actually gone for an even lower fuel load. I think that was where half my problems were coming from. The car was, at any given point, a couple of kilos heavier than it should have been on account of this.
Car on the right. Clear on the right.
Oh, as I almost have an absolute disaster trying to overcome this Merc. It's BMW, rather. These European cars, guys, they all look the same to me these days. I'm a JDM boy through and through. I need to start driving the R35. That short shift manic. Alright, we're coming up into the last of our laps now, as I really double down and say to myself, Consistency. Arias is way back at 23 seconds, 24 now. Shooting up to 25, so odds are he's running into some pretty bad traffic. I feel like I've seen the blue flag on every lap of this race, and it's because I've been lapping someone. It's been absolutely crazy. Such an eventful race, almost nothing to fast forward through. I'm just loving it. I'm loving it. Every time I get up to another train, it's like another puzzle I have to decode. It's like, all right, how am I going to get past these guys? What's the strategy going to be? How are we going to do it? So massive train coming up ahead. Thank you very much as I flash.
Clear on the right.
Very nicely lets me through in the Maserati. I think he knows it's largely hopeless for that car in these conditions. Much appreciated. He just completely shoots out. That looks like giving up on life to me personally. Yeah, I think that... No, it was either an uncontrollable spin or someone just giving up on the race. So massive train here. 2 GT4s intermingled with 2 GT3s. This is what I live for, these kind of conditions. Absolutely love it. Me with the highest ping on the server. Potential disaster waiting to happen. As I feign a move on the inside. Porsche holding his lines, getting through one of the 2 GT4s. The Expo, which I really do want to drive a lot more in the future. I love that thing's turbo lag. It's so inspirational to drive. I thought better of trying to get the slipstream there. I think that would have been a potential disaster waiting to happen. I need all my downforce. I need all my clean air in these conditions. As we come up to O'Donnell on T1, I want to make sure I don't rear into the back of him. Braking nice and early. Lots of room to spare. As I come in a bit wider, I get the better line. I get the better exit.
Car on the left.
He lets me through.
Clear on the left.
Very nice of him. There's no compulsion. No compulsion by the league rules to make that happen, but these are some very nice gentlemen. As I try and get some kind of torque leading out of the S's to catch this Aston. And I'm like, why can't I catch this GT4 before I realize that it's actually a GT3, so we have the same balance of performance. I'm just not driving as aggressively as I was earlier. As I let off very, very early, make sure nothing untoward happens. We're on the last 2 or 3 of our laps of the race here. I really don't want anything crazy to happen. As I come up to this GT4, very awkward position. I know that by the time I'm side by side with him, we'll be very, very close to the high-speed hairpin. I decide to go for the move anyway. I have no time to lose. I'm confident that he's seen me. I'm up alongside him. And bam, just turns into me. And bam, turns into me again. Now, you guys do let me know if I did something wrong there. I mean, I've seen a lot of GT World Challenge racing, and the GT3s would go for far more aggressive moves than that. I don't feel like that was my fault. But if you guys feel it was, do let me know down below. I do like learning from these experiences. My apologies for that encounter to the BMW. But in my opinion, that was avoidable. Track feels like it's drying out now. I think the rain has actually stopped now. I'm partly too autistic to actually stop my wiper from working. But I just decided to leave it there. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? As we come up to a Lexus, no, rather a Porsche. I don't know why the standings are so slow to update. But a lot of Porsches in this race. I'm guessing they're BOP'd quite decently for Suzuka. I'm guessing they're really good on the corner exits. Applying the weight of that engine over the rear axle.
Yeah, not sure how to save that.
Now these should be the second last lap of the race here. I'm really just like, all right, consolidate. I'm well committed to doing the S's in second gear at this point. Just more torque, more grip. I'm not really trying to race anyone at this point. I just want to finish my race. Say I actually finished on the podium for once. My respect to all the people that took GT4s in this game. I like that everybody is in this just for fun. Out of 26 cars, 10 of them appear to be GT4s, which is awesome. I mean, it takes a lot of guts to, you know, be lapped in these conditions by a faster class of cars. You really have to have a lot of track awareness. Really also have to be on your toes and watch what you're doing as a GT3 too. Potential disasters await. Such as that one. Narrowly averted. I don't know how the curbs haven't massacred me in this run. Either I got really, really lucky or just Suzuka likes me. We gradually catch this Porsche. I'm still driving at about 85-90% here. Especially at 130R. I'm still not confident here.
Sorry, Stokes.
Probably the hardest push I've done here though. Possibly the best line I've done through there for the entire race. We come up to the chicane mark and nail it almost perfectly. Turn hard, Omen. As the TC pulsates, frantically trying to get grip on this quote-unquote dry line. I do love the look of this game when it's cloudy and wet. Very desaturated, very... a bit more realistic. Still a bit over-contrasted, but a bit more realistic. I believe this is the second time we're passing El Cachola. As he opts to, I think, let me through there. Now, very difficult to know people are about to do that unless they indicate.
Closed up to second and third.
So I'm not sure if we have different rules for the GT3 class. If you're being lapped in a GT3 and you've got a blue flag, you're meant to let somebody through and get off your line. But I know that Mike is adamant that the car behind should find its way around you if it is quicker. Maybe letting off the throttle on a straight when you're on your racing line, that would be a good idea. But going off your line specifically, I don't know. A little bit risque. We come up to another Aston, this time of our own class, our own BOP as he goes super wide. Still gets a reasonable exit out of there. Now I'm kind of wondering what's going to happen here. I've gone off my line, unfortunately. I've lost the run, so we're going to have to stick with him for a little while. Nice and conservative as he goes wide. I had a feeling he would do that. Now I'm petrified he's going to rejoin on me, so I'm just going to keep it nice and tight here.
Car on the right. Clear on the right.
Definitely didn't maximize that turn. Just safety above all. This is our last lap. Got to be nice and safe, nice and secure, nice and cautious as we come up to 130R for the last time, praying. Going in 5th gear. That's how much courage I'd amassed by this point in the race, guys. Come up to the chicane mark, overshooting it woefully for the final time. Me just disrespecting the track limits completely, knowing they're not going to care. Compared to the dry times, this is nothing. As we are about to cross the finish line for our very first online win ever in my entire life out of any sim ever. Outside of private matches with my friends who are at a very different skill level. So I hope you guys enjoyed that race half as much as I did, because that was absolutely wonderful. My thanks to Big Mike, to all the people who participated in this race. I had an absolute blast. I look forward to doing this again in the future. You guys did amazingly well. Your racecraft was great. Your track awareness was great. I had very minimal scuffles with people on the track. So if you guys enjoyed that video, if you want to do some league racing with us, check the links down below. Join my racing community on simracing.gp. Make sure to smash that subscribe, catch our future videos, and I'll see you guys in 2021. Take it easy. Have a good new year.